After being abandoned by her husband, a pregnant woman helped an injured man and took him to the hospital. The next day, when she woke up, she was surprised to see a line of black cars parked in front of her house. "Hello, my name is Margarita, and I'm a mechanic in Kiev, Ukraine. Ever since I was a child, I've always loved tinkering with cars with my father, and that's how I discovered my passion for engines and tools. I work in a workshop in the city center where I spend my days fixing cars and constantly learning more about mechanics. My life was going well until everything suddenly changed. I met George a year ago, and we quickly fell in love. He was loving and caring, and I really believed he was the man of my life. Everything seemed perfect until the day I found out I was pregnant, and not just with one, but with 2 babies. I was excited and nervous at the same time and couldn't wait to share the news with George. I woke up early that spring morning, nervous and excited. I had important news to tell George. We met at the cafe we always went to on Saturdays. I ordered a tea and waited for him, feeling butterflies in my stomach. When he arrived, he smiled and kissed me on the forehead, but soon noticed my serious expression. "George, I have something to tell you," I began, trying to stay calm. "I'm pregnant." He stayed silent for a few seconds, and I could see the surprise in his eyes. "With twins," I added, trying to smile. But George didn't smile back. His face turned pale, and he seemed lost in thought. "I need some time to think," he said, suddenly getting up from the table. "We'll talk later." I sat there alone, feeling a wave of fear and confusion wash over me. That night, I tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. What was going on? The next day, I went to his house, determined to understand what was happening. I knocked on the door several times until a woman opened it. She looked surprised and asked who I was. With my heart in my mouth, I explained that I was looking for George. "I'm his fiancé," she said calmly, showing a sparkling ring on her finger. My world collapsed at that moment. George, the man I loved and trusted, had been cheating on me all along. He had a fiancé and had never told me anything. I went home in shock, not knowing what to do. I felt lost and alone. I cried all night, imagining what it would be like to raise my children without their father. But in the midst of my pain, a familiar voice brought me some comfort. Maria, my best friend, appeared at my door with a tight hug. "You are not alone," she said. "We'll get through this together." Maria helped me find strength I didn't even know I had, and so I began to take the first steps to restart my life, knowing that despite everything, I needed to be strong for my babies. After the shock of discovering George's betrayal, I knew I needed to move forward. I couldn't just sit around crying over what had happened. Maria, my best friend, was an angel during this time. She came to my house every day, bringing food, cheering me up, and most importantly, helping me find a new job. Maria knew Joanna, the owner of a mechanical workshop in the city. She talked to Joanna and managed to schedule an interview for me. I was nervous but knew I needed this opportunity. On the morning of the interview, I dressed as best I could and went to the workshop, trying to hide the fear I felt. When I arrived, Joanna greeted me with a smile. She was a strong and determined woman, and I knew I had to do my best to impress her. We talked for a while, and I told her about my experience as a mechanic. Joanna seemed to like what she heard, but I knew I had to prove my worth in practice. "You start tomorrow," she said, surprising me. I thanked her and Maria, who was beside me, grinning from ear to ear. It was a relief to know I had gotten the job, but I also knew the real challenge was just beginning. On my first day of work, I arrived early and introduced myself to my new colleagues. They welcomed me well, but I could feel they were curious to see if I really knew what I was doing. I rolled up my sleeves and dove into the work, fixing cars and learning about the dynamics of the workshop. Each day was a new opportunity to show my skills and learn more. Jonah was demanding but fair, and little by little, I earned her trust. She taught me a lot and always challenged me to improve. It was tough at first, especially with the pregnancy, but I knew I needed to be strong. With each car I fixed, I felt a little more pride and confidence. I was building a new life, one step at a time, and gradually I realized that despite all the difficulties, I was capable of overcoming any challenge. The workshop became more than just a workplace. It was a place where I could rebuild myself, find strength, and believe in the future. Day by day, I was becoming not just a better mechanic, but also a stronger and more determined person. I was heading home after a long day at the workshop when I saw something that made me stop. By the side of the road lay a man, clearly injured. My heart raced, and without thinking twice, I parked the car and ran to him. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying not to panic. He opened his eyes slowly and mumbled something I couldn't understand. He was hurt and needed urgent help. I knew I couldn't leave him there, so with some effort, I got him into my car and drove straight to the nearest hospital. When I arrived, the nurses rushed to help and took him inside. I waited anxiously in the waiting room, wondering who he was and what had happened. After some time, a nurse came to inform me that he was stable but needed to stay under observation. I sighed with relief, but knew I still had another battle to face. Because of the rescue, I arrived late at work, and Jonah, my boss, was not happy. She called me for a conversation as soon as I got back to the workshop. "Margarita, we can't afford delays," she said, visibly irritated. "I understand you wanted to help, but we need commitment here." I tried to explain the situation, but Jonah was adamant. She penalized me with a pay cut for that day. I left the workshop with a heavy heart, feeling that even though I had done the right thing, I was being punished. That night, while trying to relax and forget the difficult day, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it and saw an older man, elegantly dressed, with a worried look on his face. "Are you Margarita?" he asked. "I am Daniel's father, the man you saved. I came to thank you personally." He handed me an envelope with money, insisting I accept it as a sign of gratitude. Reluctantly, I accepted but asked about Daniel's condition. Then he told me something frightening. Daniel had been kidnapped and was being kept sedated against his will. I was shocked. How could someone do that, and why? Daniel's father thanked me again and left, leaving me with a whirlwind of thoughts. I knew I couldn't just forget what had happened. Daniel needed help, and I was determined to find out more about this story. After learning about Daniel's terrible situation, I was disturbed. I couldn't stop thinking about him, alone and sedated in the hospital. The next day, I went to visit him. When I arrived, I met a nurse named Lucia, who seemed like a good and trustworthy person. "Hi, I'm Margarita," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm here to see Daniel. He was brought in yesterday." Lucia looked at me with concern and led me to Daniel's room. He was lying in bed, still unconscious and sedated. "There's something strange about all this," Lucia explained. "The dosage is too high for a simple injury." I felt a chill down my spine. His father told me Daniel was kidnapped. I confessed to her. Someone is keeping him like this on purpose. Lucia was shocked, but after a moment of silence, she nodded. "We need to get him out of here," she said decisively, "but we need to be careful." We spent the rest of the day planning the rescue. I was nervous but knew it needed to be done. That night, we returned to the hospital. Lucia managed to turn off the monitors, and get Daniel out of bed without attracting attention. Carefully, we took him to my car and placed him in the back seat. We drove in silence, our nerves on edge. Finally, we arrived at my house, where I had prepared a room for Daniel. He was still unconscious, but Lucia promised the sedation would wear off soon. I thanked her from the bottom of my heart, knowing that without her help, this wouldn't have been possible. The next day, Daniel began to wake up. He was confused and weak, but he could talk. "Where am I?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "You're safe," I told him. "I'm Margarita. I found you by the side of the road and later discovered what was happening. You were kidnapped." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "It was Fernando," he whispered. "My guardian. He wants my inheritance." I couldn't believe Fernando's wickedness. How could someone do that? "Don't worry," I told Daniel, holding his hand. "We'll sort this out. You are not alone anymore." Daniel seemed relieved, but I knew the fight was just beginning. With Lucia's help and the support of Daniel's father, we began gathering evidence against Fernando. It was dangerous, but I was determined to bring justice. Every day, Daniel recovered a little more, and slowly we grew closer, sharing our stories and fears. I had never met anyone like him, and despite everything, I felt that something good could come from this terrible situation. Rescuing Daniel was just the beginning. Now we needed to face the real threat. Fernando. We couldn't let him get away with what he had done. With Daniel slowly recovering, I knew every day was precious to gather evidence against his guardian. Lucia, the nurse who helped us get Daniel out of the hospital, continued to be a valuable ally. She started looking for documents and medical records that proved what Fernando had done. Meanwhile, Daniel's father used his influence to open an official investigation. Daniel stayed at my house, recovering little by little. We talked a lot, and I discovered how brave and determined he was. Even weakened, he was willing to fight for justice. This inspired me to keep going, even when everything seemed difficult. One day, Lucia brought important news. "I found the medical records," she said, with a triumphant gleam in her eyes. They clearly showed that Daniel was being sedated deliberately and unnecessarily. This evidence was crucial. We decided to take these documents to the authorities. Daniel was nervous, but also relieved to finally have something concrete against Fernando. We went to the police station together, where we handed everything over to the investigator in charge of the case. The following days were full of anxiety. The investigation was underway, but we didn't know the outcome yet. Daniel and I spent a lot of time together, supporting each other. We began to share more about our lives, our hopes, and our fears. The connection between us grew stronger each day. Finally, the news we had been waiting for arrived. The police had enough evidence to arrest Fernando. He was detained and charged with kidnapping and attempted fraud. Daniel and I were called to testify in court. It was a tense moment, but we were ready. On the day of the trial, I saw Fernando for the first time. He was a cold and calculating man, but I didn't let myself be intimidated. I told my part of the story clearly, as did Lucia and Daniel's father. When it was Daniel's turn, he spoke with a strength I had never seen before. He told everything he had suffered at Fernando's hands, and made it clear he wouldn't let him ruin his life. The judge listened attentively, and after everyone's testimony, he declared Fernando guilty. It was a moment of relief and joy. Justice was done. Daniel was free, and Fernando would pay for his crimes. We returned home, exhausted but happy. We sat on the couch, and Daniel looked into my eyes. "We can finally move forward," he said, smiling. "Yes," I replied, feeling a wave of happiness. "Now we can focus on our future." And so we began planning the next phase of our life together. With Fernando out of the way, we could build the family we had always dreamed of. The twins were about to arrive, and I knew Daniel would be an amazing father. Additionally, the women's workshop was becoming a reality. Each day was a new step toward our dream, and with each challenge we overcame, we felt we were getting closer to complete happiness together. Daniel and I were an unbeatable team, and we knew that with love and determination, we could face any obstacle life threw at us. After all the storms we faced, the calm finally arrived. Daniel and I were closer than ever. With Fernando out of our lives, we could focus on building our future together. Our days were filled with joy and plans for the future. Daniel was always by my side, helping with the preparations for the twins' arrival. Every ultrasound, every kick I felt in my belly, was a special moment we shared with great love. One day, we were walking in the park, holding hands, when Daniel suddenly stopped. He turned to me with a serious but loving look. "Margarita," he began, "these last months have been a roller coaster, but one thing has become clear to me. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you and our children." My heart skipped a beat. Before I could respond, he knelt down and took a small box from his pocket. "Will you marry me?" he asked with a shy smile. Tears of joy filled my eyes. "Yes, Daniel, of course, yes," I replied, hugging him tightly. He slid the ring onto my finger, and we kissed under the blue sky, feeling that all our effort and struggle had been worth it. With the wedding planned, we started to plan our new life. Daniel took on the role of father to my twins with so much love and dedication that my heart filled with gratitude every day. He was always present, taking care of me, going to appointments, and helping set up the baby's room. Additionally, our idea of opening a franchise of mechanical workshops for women began to take shape. With Daniel's help and Jonah's support, we gathered the necessary resources. We decided to start with a pilot workshop in Kiev, offering not only mechanical services, but also basic courses so that women could learn to take care of their own cars. The opening was a success. Seeing the smiles and confidence of the women who came to us was rewarding. It was more than a business, it was a community of support and empowerment. I had never felt so fulfilled. But not everything was easy. We faced daily challenges, from the logistics of the new business to the final preparations for the baby's arrival. Amid all this, there was still the shadow of the past, especially with the possibility of encountering George at some point. However, each challenge made us stronger. Daniel and I supported each other, knowing that together we could face anything. Our home was filled with love, and the anticipation of the twins' arrival kept us excited and hopeful. Then, on a cold winter day, my babies were born. Daniel was by my side, holding my hand and smiling with tears in his eyes. When I heard the first cry, my heart almost burst with happiness. They were perfect. We returned home with our little miracles, ready to start our new life as a family. Each day was an adventure, but with Daniel by my side, I knew we could face anything. Our journey was just beginning, and I couldn't be happier. The arrival of the twins transformed our lives in ways I could never have imagined. Each day was a mix of joy and challenges. Daniel and I were learning to be parents, discovering together the joys and difficulties of raising two babies. Our days began early and ended late, but every smile from our children made it all worth it. Daniel proved to be an incredible father, always willing to help, learn, and take care of us. His support was crucial, and our connection grew even stronger. The women's workshop was also thriving. We received many clients, and the courses we offered were a success. Seeing the confidence grow in the eyes of the women we served was gratifying. They learned to take care of their own cars and feel safe on the road, something that had always been a dream for me. Despite all the happiness, we knew there were still issues from the past that needed to be resolved. One day, while we were at the workshop, I heard a familiar voice. I turned around and saw George. He looked older, tired, and for the first time, I saw regret in his eyes. "Margarita," he began, "I heard about the twins. I need to talk to you." Daniel, who was beside me, took my hand. "I'm here," he said, giving me strength. I took a deep breath and looked at George. "Georgia, a lot has changed," I began. "You left us when we needed you the most. Daniel is here. He is the father of my children, and we won't let you hurt us again." George lowered his head. I know I was wrong. I just wanted to ask for forgiveness and, if possible, be part of their lives in some way. It was a difficult decision. I knew George had the right to see his children, but I also knew I needed to protect our new family. "We can talk about it," I finally replied, "but things will be on our terms." With time, we found a way to include George in the twins' lives in a safe and controlled manner. It wasn't easy, but it was the best for our children. They deserved to know the truth, but they also needed the stability and love that Daniel and I were determined to provide. Challenges continued to arise, but we were ready to face them together. Our workshop was growing, our children were growing up healthy and happy, and our love was getting stronger every day. I learned that life is full of ups and downs, but with courage, determination, and love, it is possible to overcome any obstacle. Every day with Daniel and our children was a blessing. Together, we faced the past, built the present, and looked to the future with hope. We knew that no matter what came our way, we would be ready to face it all together as a family. And so our story continued, full of challenges, but also of love, overcoming, and happiness. Because in the end, what really matters is being with those we love, facing life hand in hand, and always ready for the next chapter. Margarita found strength where she least expected it and turned a life of pain into a story of overcoming and love. Each challenge faced brought a new beginning, and now she lives fully with her new family. Video cuts to an image of Margarita smiling, surrounded by her family and coworkers at the workshop. If you were moved by this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories. We want to know your opinion, so comment below what you thought of this video. Your feedback is essential for us. Our channel is new, and your interaction helps us reach more people. Watch our latest video, also full of emotion and surprising twists, and continue to be inspired by real stories that touch the heart.